Hi, this is Mike from BandLab, and in this video we're going to make an old school electro beat in BandLab's free online DAW. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description. And if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. I begin by setting the project tempo to 130 beats per minute and the project key to E minor. The most important part of an electro track is the beat, so that's where I'm going to start. If we open BandLab's Sounds and search for Electro, we can find a pack made by none other than Electro legend and founding member of NWA, Arabian Prince. I'm going to use OG-AP NWA space kick and OG-AP NWA space clap as the foundation of my beat. I create a new virtual instrument track and select the sampler instrument. I drag the kick sample onto the first pad and the clap onto the second. I create a MIDI clip to sequence these sounds by double-clicking on the track. I start composing the beat with claps on the second and fourth beat of the first two bars. I then add kicks to give me a classic-sounding electro rhythm. I duplicate this beat out for the rest of the clip. To duplicate clips or MIDI notes in BandLab, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, then drag them into the desired position. I turn this track down to -10 dB to give me headroom to add other tracks. Next, I'd like some 808 flavor, so I create a virtual instrument track and set it to drums, drum pads, 808 kit. For this, I add some closed hi-hats on eighth notes with an open hi-hat at the end of the first bar. I also add some cowbells to funk things up a little, and then I turn this track down to -7 dB. A commonly used rhythmic sound in electro tracks is what might be described as a zap or splat. You can hear this kind of sound on electro innovator Egyptian Lovers tracks, where he used the 808's accent trigger to create this effect. We can find something similar in the Arabian Prince pack in the form of OG-AP NWA space click 1. I make a new sampler track and drop this sample into the first pad. Again, I sequence a repeating 2-bar pattern. To add an extra rhythmic dimension to the sound, I open the effects panel and add a delay, de-delay effect, setting the time to 0.317 Hz, the feedback to 0, and the wet level to 21. I set the track to -11 dB. I'd like another rhythmic layer, so in BandLab's Sounds, I select the Loops tab and search for Shaker. Backstreet's Shaker 02 is the kind of thing I'm looking for, so I drag this onto a new track and I use the loop handle at the top right corner of the clip to loop it out for the whole 4-bar sequence. I set its volume level to -7.5 dB. Electro tracks tend to have a punchy, dramatic feel, and I'd like to add a stab sound to set the tone of what's to come. I search for stab and drag Ultra Bounce Horn Stab into the project onto the first beat of the first bar. I set this track's volume at -6 dB. After drums, bass is the most important element of an electro track. I want to add a bass sound with a fair degree of mid-range presence, so I create a new virtual instrument track and select Basses, Synth Basses, Attack Bass. I sequence a simple bass line that mainly stays on one note, with a minor second in there to funk things up a little. I'd like to bring out this bass's mid-range, so I add a tone graphic EQ effect. and boost the 1.6 kHz band to about 4 dB. I also add a reverb, studio reverb, with a mix of 2.0. I bring the size down to 0.8 to give it a more natural room feel. I set this track to -7 dB. Next, I'd like to add an arpeggiator style synth. For this, I'm going to use keyboards, synth leads, Vintage 4 instrument. I program this to play an ascending pattern that hits every semitone and repeats after 6 notes. I sequence a single bar of these, then duplicate that out for the rest of the clip. To make this feel more interesting rhythmically, I add a D delay, with a time set to 0.045 Hz, feedback set to 0, and a wet level of 16. To make it sound more natural, I add a studio reverb with a mix of 1 and a size of 1.5. I'd like this to have a touch less low end, so I add a tone, EQ3M, and turn the low down to -1.8 dB. I set this track to -8 dB. I'd like another synth layer, so I add a virtual instrument track and select keyboards, Synth Pads, Chill Wave Synth. This follows the pitch of the bass line with sustained notes, but the second time around it plays a minor third rather than a minor second. I'd like to cut the bass out of the sound, so I add a tone, multi-filter, and then put it in high-pass mode. I set the frequency to around 120 Hz. I want this to feel a little less static, so I add a modulation, ST chorus. Once again, I'd like a more natural room feel on the sound, so I add a studio reverb, setting the mix to 3.5 and the size to 3.6. I set the volume to -9 dB. I'd like a white noise-based riser effect to transition between sections, so I search BandLab's sounds for white noise. I drag batter short white noise sweep up onto the project, placing it at the end of the 4-bar sequence. I'd like this to have some filter delay on it to make it sound a little more rhythmic and interesting, so I add a delay, filter echo, setting the delay to 250 milliseconds and the feedback to 79%. When that's all set, I turn this track down to -6 dB. Arrangement-wise, I begin with a beat-based intro, where a layer of the drums is added every 4 bars. Then the bass line drops, and the other synth elements are added and removed to keep the track flowing. At the 65 bar mark, there's a breakdown, where the beats and bass take a break, and the synths and space click keep things rolling. Then, the bass is reintroduced before the beat drops again. After this, the ARP element is removed, and I finish with just the bass. You can fork this project and make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!